I had a lot of difficulty coming up with this, and in the end, I came up with sort of yin-yang symbol of the bomb shelter and the peace sign. And for me, growing up, that represented the very blackest of blacks and the hope of the future. So I think we are schizophrenic in a sense, all of us in that generation, where we see the evil that everybody can do to each other, and yet there is always this hope that somehow we're going to pull ourselves out of that, and it represents for me the basic pessimism of my life, my mind, and yet I have to create, even though in some ways I think it is a dream, that there is this hope for humanity and so forth. So it's a kind of dualism to the whole thing.
Do you think this book, Generation X, what you took out of it, could this stand as symbolic of the way you look at life as well, even though it's written by a generation younger than yours?
Oh yeah, I certainly. Again, I don't think you can. It's very difficult to call somebody, one thing or the other, because we do overlap. It depends on your cultural background, even your geographical background. When I first moved to New Brunswick, I said, "Oh, these guys are caught in the 50s, right?" Because we were hip and we were in the 60s or 70s or whatever. And so I do think that all these things play into it. But it definitely captured, I think, sort of the subtext of all of these generations and so forth. So yes,
it's a portrait of a generation at a certain age.
Yeah, I'd say a good one.
And Hannah, by the way, I know lots of 40-somethings who still think they're 22. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Stephen, the symbol of Generation X, is this it? This has got the title, but is there one that stands out for you?
It's not really one symbol. I mean, I think the book would sort of be the symbol at that time when it came out and sort of described, sort of the 20s, that sort of age group. But, there's so much going on, a lot of single families, women going to the workforce, so latchkey kids. There was a lot of things as far as, cable TV and the internet was coming out, and, Beavis and Butthead and X Games. So there's a lot of sort of things that sort of built on this whole slacker, sort of culture that was sort of put out there, I think, by the media. But I think, over time, as, the Generation X sort of got older and sort of, quietly went about and did their things, that the symbols would change, right? So I don't know if there's any one symbol per se. I actually came across another book called X Saves the World.
I've read it.
And the author, Jeff Gordner, he sort of put forth that that Generation X is all about making an impact without having a parade, which I thought was quite interesting, because he's saying, things like the people who started, like YouTube and Amazon and Google and, the Jon Stewarts of the world and the Quentin Tarantinos, that they're sort of going out and, as he says, saving the world from sucking is sort of how he phrases it. So I guess there's not really a symbol in the sense that Generation X doesn't feel they need a symbol, right? They just sort of do what they do and sort of let everyone else, take credit, or maybe history will come back and say how big of an impact they had.
Hannah, you're the millennial. Do you have a symbol? Is it too early to say?
It's probably early to say, but I think, broadly speaking, probably the internet. Just the idea of this interconnectedness and the speed at which everything moves now, and how you cannot possibly be not connected today, would serve as a fairly accurate symbol. But even the idea of Wikipedia, specifically, that it's this place where you can go and you can get an answer to almost anything, and you can get it immediately, which seems to be very much some kind of demand of my generation, that you have this right to know the information, and you absolutely need to know it immediately. And, you won't go to the library and wait and hear about it from somebody else, but you just Google it, you just Wikipedia it very quickly. And this idea that maybe we think that if we can just continue to keep learning and learning and learning as much as we can, maybe that's how we work towards something else. But until you come out of this ignorance of childhood or not being as connected, you kind of need to keep pushing and keep searching. And so I guess the internet broadly, in terms of the way that we communicate, the way that we learn, the way that we conduct research even, but maybe Wikipedia specifically, that it's, an encyclopedia, but very different than ever before and very instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too because it's also very collaborative,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not, this is how it is, and someone's writing it on paper and publishing a book and saying, this is what the definition of something is. It's the collective sort of agreeing, that this is what we want something to mean, and people can, argue that or challenge that, contribute to that. So I think that's
That's a great point, and how much more fluid maybe
Yeah.
some of the definitions that we have about these things are today. And